Hey everyone, I'm Mike Henry. Welcome to my Procreate 5 demo on the piece I call Uptown Hoops. So after some of the recent monster pieces, it was just kind of nice to do like what I call a recharge piece. Something where it's not about challenge, it's not about necessarily doing anything too like bombastic or trying to display extreme skill or nothing where there's pressure. It's just about saying, okay, I want to relax for a bit and draw something. And then that would give me energy to proceed to whatever the next one is that takes just a little bit more. You have to take a little more on to get it done. So you can see here that my go-to is always just kind of relax with a headshot, do something maybe that's at least a little bit interesting, but nothing too extreme. And you can see here we have the sketch of this lovely lady right here. Let's pause on the sketch for a second. So I've talked before about not needing that much information when I know I'm going to be the one coloring it. This is basically as far as I'll go with something when I know that I'm going to then take it to paint. Why waste the time refining the sketch too much from like a line quality perspective or a finish quality perspective when you know that you're just going to eliminate them eventually anyhow. This was drawn with the fat pencil, which is in the free brush pack linked below in the description. So this is just about trying to find kind of the flow of it and go with something simple, hopefully something striking. I knew almost immediately when I started the sketch that I was going to make her backlit, so I was trying to strike a somewhat interesting silhouette first and foremost. So let's keep going with it. One of the things that I hear from a lot of you when you leave comments is you want to know more about how to paint without the lines. Like, how do you get rid of the lines? I completely understand this question because that was something that I struggled with years ago, because when I was younger I always wanted to be a comic book artist. Then when I was learning how to color, it was about kind of like not really learning how to draw comic book art like look and feel, but more just like the thought process around the coloring, that the coloring was there and that the lines were going to take a lot of the heavy lifting off of that. That's not to besmirch comic book colors, because obviously there's a lot colors have to deal with in order to make it look good and tight deadlines and all that kind of stuff. All I'm saying is that in traditional comic book art, the lines do a lot of that work, right? Whereas if you don't have lines, there's now no longer something there to give you that support. So when you're in the mentality of the lines are going to be here, the lines are my friend, getting rid of them can be stressful. I don't have a secret tip to how to get rid of lines. It really just comes down to confidence and practice, and I have to admit that even myself still to this day, sometimes when I'm making that transition, I am concerned. Like for instance, I think that even in this piece, there's subtlety in some of the line work that I didn't really capture in the render. That's something that you sometimes just have to live with and move on, right? Move to the next piece, don't belabor the same piece for too long. And so with the method of getting rid of the lines, it's literally this. You draw your picture, you start to color, and you lower the opacity of the lines, and then you lower them more, and then you lower them more. And as you're working on it, you're adding more of that color information, and you're adding more of, like, say, the flats structure or where something is, or maybe once you're to the rendering, you're defining the form a little bit more, and over time, you take that line layer and you lower its opacity basically until it's zero, or at least until you make the conscious decision to turn it off. Now let's freeze here for a second. This right here is essentially my color key. I just kind of wanted to test the lighting really quickly. I've been doing this more recently, however I definitely don't do it all the time. I sometimes do it when I know that I want to figure something out really quickly, and then I also want to save something to my phone just so that I can like ponder it, as opposed to just saving the lines to my phone and thinking about it for a while. This is the level of finish that I will hit when I'm just trying to decide whether or not the piece has legs. Sometimes that'll happen even during the sketch, like if I'm just not enjoying the subject matter or I didn't really capture something that interested me. But in this case, I took it all the way to this stage so that I could see if that's really what I wanted to keep working with. Then I decided to add the earring, the hoop, and start working on it from that point on. Now back to the line discussion. You can see here that because I am generally, let's say 98% of the time, confident that I can take lines to paints, no problem, I kind of have mental steps already that I adjust my line art, and really it's nothing extreme. It's just from the beginning, once I start flatting, I generally lower my rough lines down to say 20%, 15 to 20%, so that I can see a nice healthy mix of, am I hitting the original intention of the lines, as well as are the flats able to stand on their own? Have I applied them in the level of quality that I want, either super refined or deliberately rough or whatever it might be? From that point on, I start doing all of this painting that you're seeing right here, where I'm actually adding in the shadow, and you can see that the lines are still there. As I'm working, if I feel like I can't totally perceive the true look of the painting, I'll turn the lines on or off, or maybe I'll lower them even more. There'll even be sometimes a stage where the lines are so low in opacity that it's almost like, why not just turn them off? But maybe there's just enough information there that I want to make sure it sticks around. And I'm talking like 4% opacity, something like that. The lines will be virtually gone, but there might still be something in them that I need to make sure that I capture, so I'll leave them around. And really, that is the entire process behind learning how to paint without your lines. It's like training wheels, but it's like a gradiated training wheels. Like, imagine if you could put training wheels on your bike, you learn how to ride, but then you get some sort of different training wheels that have less support, and then some other training wheels that have even less support, and then eventually you can just freely ride your bike. It's similar to that. In fact, I would argue that I'm at the stage where I don't have to do the lines if I really didn't want to. However, I think that would be stupid, just because that would be more like a stunt than anything. I mean, I grew up drawing with lines, and it just speeds up the entire process for me. I could do a sketch of something, a rough sketch, way faster than I would be able to block it all in with color, just because of my skill set and the way that I've grown it over time. So that is my summary on how to paint without lines. It's really not the idea of painting without lines, it's that you are just slowly extracting those lines from your process. Now, I know, or not from your process, sorry, from the painting in a process where you're just reducing. There are some people out there who will put their lines as part of the painting. It'll at some point get kind of like meshed in, like kind of interwoven. Maybe they've got some layers under the lines, some layers on top of the lines, and the lines are still somewhere in there. Maybe they'll even paint on the layer that has the lines. As you know, if you've followed me for a while, or at least seen some videos, I don't like to really paint in like a destructive way where you're losing things. So if I were to actually paint on the layer that has the lines, I would feel personally very uncomfortable with that, because that's just not my process. So for me, everything stays separated and clean in case I need to adjust something or bring something back later. It's kind of rare, but there are still instances where I could be 80% through a painting, and then I'll have to turn the lines back up to something really high, like 70%, because there's something in the lines that I need that information again. I need that visual information again to support what I'm currently doing. Now, this piece, as far as the conceptual aspects of it, there's no story here. There's no goal like there is with, say, the monster characters, where I'm saying, like, I'm going to draw a Sasquatch or whatever, right? This is more just when I sit down and I've got a blank canvas and I'm just starting to do something, what are the shapes that are coming out? I almost always am naturally starting by drawing some sort of a head. I've talked about before how when it comes to character design, I'm usually like a head down type person. I start at the head and then I start figuring out the rest of the character. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And so that means that also when I'm just naturally doodling, it's always going to be a head first and foremost. And then I'll probably consciously say, like if I do like a sheet of heads, I'll be like, I should probably draw like some hands or I don't know, something else. And then I'll force myself to do that. It's not really that I can't or that I'm scared to or that I don't know, something along those lines, something where it's like a negative thing. It's more just like, if I'm just going to sit and have some fun for a bit, why force myself to do something else? There's going to be people out there that are going to say, no, art is about growing or whatever. You should challenge yourself. I agree with that a lot of the time, but I also feel that, like how I mentioned, this is a recharge piece. On a recharge piece, I don't agree with that. I think that you should go to your wheelhouse. You should just do something that's fun. I think sometimes when we talk about when you have artist block, it's because people are usually trying to push themselves to do something, and maybe that's the time where you just go back and do something fun, and you kind of get that mojo back, and then you move forward again. And so I think that art, I mean, nobody did art originally for the challenge. Like when you were young and you were just doodling, you were doodling because you were excited about something or you wanted to see it on the paper or something like that. And then as you became sort of more, I don't know, intellectual, you're the pursuit of growth starts consuming you. You start really focusing on, I need to do art that makes me grow. I think that as a professional, that's super true, but there's still that part where it's like, art also has to be rewarding. As a professional, you have a job to do and you need to deliver what's been asked of you. But when you're doing it for fun, challenge is cool, but so is sometimes taking it easy and just getting that creative energy back, getting that confidence back, taking a second to just say, I drew something for fun, only for fun, and that's why you did it. Now, I will admit that that's not... This piece isn't entirely without trying something, right? Like, I would say there's nothing in this piece that I've never done before, but there are aspects of this piece that are something I do rarely. Like, I rarely throw a shadow on the entire character and backlight them. Sure. I very rarely have this kind of a lighting setup where there's a stronger light sort of coming from below that's creating that bounce because all of the key light is behind the character. It's true. I rarely do those things, and you could argue that that was me stretching or challenging or something, but I would also argue that none of those things were hard. None of those things were particularly pushing me. It was more just about, okay, I'll do that on this one. It was a change, but it wasn't a thrust forward into uncharted territory. I really do believe that it's important to find that balance and challenge yourself when it's time to challenge yourself, and just do what you need to do to make yourself happy, make your client happy, to do whatever. I think it's important to find that balance. I mean, people like to talk about challenge and growth. I think that is specifically a decision where you say, I have an area I need to grow in. I'm going to push myself there. But I would also argue that, for instance, if you're doing client work, the client really doesn't want you challenging yourself. The client might want you challenging the creativity of the project or really pushing it forward in some really interesting way, but the client doesn't really want their project to be the project where you're saying, oh man, I'm gonna really figure out how to do something I've never done before. They want you to nail why they hired you in the first place. So this video hasn't really been about the techniques here, because the techniques here are standard, you could say. We've got all of the usual process that we normally follow, where we've got flats, ambient occlusion, we've got some direct shadows, we've got some rim lights, although it's not really rim light, it's more like a soft bounce. We've got these hard shines in the piece. And then the only sort of like kind of major twist, which is very similar to the piece I did called Faded a little bit ago, is that we've then got a shadow layer on the whole figure. It's just I can't remember what color it is in this. I want to say it's a warm shadow. I'm not entirely sure. I just didn't open up the file before I did this, but it doesn't really, that's not really the relevant part anyways. The point is just that there is a layer on top of her that's been adjusted with opacity, and I think it's like let's say it's a light brown, a light faded brown, and it is set to multiply to darken everything. So you'll see as this layer gets flicked on and off, you'll see sort of like her true lighting scheme. It'll come in every now and then, but at the end I wanted it to be really in shadow. Sometimes I'll turn off that shadow, even though the final is going to be in shadow. Sometimes I'll turn those things off to make little tweaks. It's about trying to see the true color, because I know I'm going to have all these modifications thrown on top, and I know the modifications will sort of do what they need to do. Okay, so now we're coming in to the very end of the piece. You can see by the way that she's all naturally colored. She is a natural human being. However, I also did a crazy version of this, a electric version, which I'll show you here in a minute. So right now though, this right here is the final piece. I did do a little bit of kind of faux chromatic aberration, kind of. It's what I talked about back in the Rita piece. If you go back a while, it's the same technique that was used there, and it was just to add like a little bit of extra interest to the whole piece. So let's take a look at that electric version now. I just did this for fun, kind of with some color shifting. As you know, with the way my layers are set up, I can shift the flats around and just kind of get something different out of them if I want. For this, it was like I was trying to hit that, I don't really know, just kind of like that sort of pop arty vibe. I didn't hate it, but I liked the original more, so I'm not really pushing this as like one of the main versions. It's more just kind of a fun alt to show. Let's go through the major stages now just to wrap it up here. We've got the sketch version, which is of course very implied because I knew that I was going to be able to take it the rest of the way since I drew it. Then we've got the color keys, flats, sort of like, do I really want to finish this version? And then we have the final take right here. So thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please consider hitting like. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. It really helps us grow. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.